Welcome back. Now, Metal Workers Union Numsa has signed a wage agreement in the motor sector today. The union said the wage hike is effective this month and will cover more than 3,000 workers. Employees will now receive a 6.5% increase, and a further 7.5% has been granted for component manufacturers and petrol attendants. For more on this, we are now joined by Numsa spokesperson Phakamile Hlubi-Majola. Phakamile, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, after a 2-year halt in increases over the COVID-19 era, it certainly is quite a progressive feat to secure such a cumulative increase during a poor economic period. What has been the reaction of your members so far?
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers, and thank you so much for having me on the show. So indeed, you are correct that we are negotiating against the backdrop of very poor economic outlook in South Africa at the moment. We are in a post-COVID-19 environment where many businesses and where many sectors are refusing to grant meaningful increases to workers. At the same time, you have a government which really has been driving an agenda for low wages and austerity measures. So the fact that we were able to secure the kind of increase that we were able to secure in this sector for us really, in our view, is significant. We were able to sign because the majority of Numsa members in the majority of regions felt that this was an acceptable agreement, and therefore we were then able to sign this agreement on Friday together with the Fuel Retailers Association as well as the RMI, which are the employer associations in the Motor Industries Bargaining Council.
Now, workers will receive a 6.5% increase in the first year, and then in the second and the third year, they will further get an increase that's either consumer price index related, whichever is the greatest between that and the percentage. Unpack some of the other perks that are secured in this deal.
So the increases are based according to sectors. The Motor Industries Bargaining Council is a council which covers various sectors within the motor industry. So it covers garage workers, it covers car dealerships, it covers components companies, as well as vehicle bodybuilders. And the increases are depending on which sector you fall under. So for example, for component manufacturers, the increase is for the first year 7.5%, for year 2 it's 6%, and for year 3 it's 6%. For garage workers it's the same. If you're a forecourt attendant it's 7.5%, 6% and 6%. And then for sector 6, which is car dealerships, the increase for year 1 is 6.5%, year 2 is 5%, and year 3 is 5%. And among the other benefits that we've managed to negotiate as part of the agreement is the fact that we were able to negotiate the fact that the threshold for the minimum rate will be increased. So previously the threshold was at 188,000 and it was below the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. We have now secured through this agreement that the threshold will now move from 188,000 to 224,000. So in other words, the minimum rate will move from 188,000 to 224,000. And we feel that that is significant because we are representing, amongst others, workers who are employed by garage companies and petrol attendants. And they, in terms of the Motor Industries Bargaining Council, they are the lowest paid. And the fact that for the longest time, their minimum rate was below the threshold, that was a burning issue. So the fact that we were able to resolve this in this round of wage talks is something that is significant on top of the increases. This particular group of workers is very vulnerable because there's been a very strong push, particularly from right-wing employer associations, for the mechanization and for this work of petrol attendants to be replaced by robots or by artificial intelligence. And in a country like ours, with extremely high levels of inequality, poverty, and unemployment, it really wouldn't make any sense to replace these workers with that type of technology, because it would mean that we are increasing the unemployment rate. So for us, it is significant that we've been able to secure these increases, particularly in the current economic climate. There's not a single worker in South Africa today who is not struggling just to survive from month to month because of the impact of the general socioeconomic conditions that we're living under today.
Phakamile, you speak of the increase in robotic technology and the possibility of job losses with regards to that. I mean, the automotive industry has suffered quite a knock when it came to jobs, specifically during the COVID-19 period, and even before that, when the reduction of a demand in cars came in place, especially with Uber services coming into play. As a union, what are your objectives with regards to championing the increase of jobs in your sector?
Numsa has really been driving an agenda for the fact that we must be putting job creation first and foremost as part of the agenda, given the fact that we really are struggling in this country with extremely high levels of unemployment. And we believe that it is the responsibility of all corporates that decide to do business with this country to actually drive that agenda as well. And if we and whilst we do acknowledge and accept that we must have and we must move forward with technology and with technological advancement, we do believe that at the end of the day, technological advancements must benefit society. And there is no benefit to society if those technological advancements result in massive job displacement and job losses. And so we think that all automotive manufacturers must understand this fundamental principle if they're going to do business with the South African government. And we want the South African government to hold those ideals very close to its heart, because we cannot afford to lose any more jobs in any sectors in this country, given the extremely high poverty levels that we're dealing with and the high unemployment levels. In fact, next week, starting Tuesday, Numsa will be hosting an automotive seminar as part of the Research and Development Institute of the organization, where we will be working with, where we will be basically having these sessions with our shop stewards in the automotive sector to talk about the changes that are coming up in the world of work, where we know that there is greater mechanization that is taking place, certainly in the auto sector, where we're talking here about the sector that deals with the manufacturing of vehicles. And so this seminar will be dealing with some of those challenges and how this government can mitigate against those challenges and ensure the sustainability of this sector and the economy in the long term.
Phakamile, just in closing and going back to the negotiations that you had with regards to this wage victory, at some point in the negotiation process, the employer had put an offer of 3% on the table. What lessons would you impart to unions currently negotiating on behalf of public sector employees who are faced with the same 3% offer?
Well, I think first of all, the main thing when it comes to negotiation is that for you to settle, you have to settle with a mandate from the majority of workers. So in terms of the settlement in the motor sector, it's broken down in various ways. Generally speaking, the increases are for 7% or 6% and above for the majority of workers. But there are some sectors of workers within that agreement where the increase is actually at, for example, 3%. For example, within the fuel retailers, for garage workers, for cashiers, for example, year 1 the increase is 5%, year 2 is 4%, and year 3 is also 4%. And as a trade union, we always try to settle above inflation, because we know that at the end of the day, when you settle at above inflation, at least that is a meaningful increase, taking into account the impact of high fuel and food costs. But at the same time, there are times when you don't necessarily win that battle. And it is upon yourself as a trade union to really do the work of trying to find one another with the employer, so that when you finally do settle, it's an agreement that is beneficial to both parties. Because in wage negotiations, there are compromises. And yes, as a trade union, we have been watching what's been happening in the public sector, where government is trying very hard to drive 3% and convince trade unions to accept 3%, even though workers in public sector have not had a meaningful increase in years. And so what really informs negotiations are the conditions at that time for that particular sector. And for us to have actually gotten to a point where we were able to sign is because the majority of regions and workers within all Numsa structures agreed to this proposal and the manner in which it was broken down, where for some sectors the increase is as high as 7.5%, but for others it's 6% or 4%, as I mentioned earlier. And at the end of the day, it really is about how you negotiate and what are some of the gains that you make. As I've said previously in this conversation, one of the things we secured was that the minimum rate of pay would increase from 188,000 to over 200,000 in line with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act.
All right.
And
Phakamile, unfortunately,
those are some of the things that you have to consider whenever you want to negotiate.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this conversation today. But thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and unpacking what it is that was received by Numsa. That's Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, who is the spokesperson for Numsa. We'll see you right after this break.